Gang. Gang. Red ring. Whoa! What is happening? Well, hello. What is going on our screens, ladies and gentlemen?
Mike, you haven't changed.
Mike, you look great.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to the Ghost Who Walks. Mike, is that one of the new figures? Like that, he looks really articulate. He looks like he speaks very well.
It's my little friend.
Now, you know what is funny? I've seen plenty of Phantom action figures and ephemera over the years, but you know what, Mike? We never talk about it. Like, I don't even know if you have a lot of Phantom stuff.
No, I don't. Here's his. You can see his. I don't know.
His skull ring. Yeah.
His rock hard abs.
Yeah, he's been doing Pilates. Yeah. Look at that.
They never, they never show him working out. They never show him like
he's not doing dips,
lifting weights. They never show him, exercising. So you just wonder if it's like some kind of like jungle steroid juice that he's drinking. That like
you also never see him eating carbs. So maybe
jungle juice sure has changed since college. It used to be in a trash can at the frat house.
No, I don't have a lot of Phantom. I don't have a lot of Phantom. I got that little figure, and somebody sent me a ring. And there's all kinds of different rings. But no, I don't have a lot of. I see stuff in a couple of Phantom groups, but I try to be very choosy now about. I got too much stuff. I'm getting rid of stuff. I'm going through stuff and getting rid of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be very picky about stuff that I buy. I mean, I see a lot of really cool stuff, like a lot of those Hot Toys figures, or you'll see like a really nicely sculpted figure, like, oh. But, eventually, I mean, where do I have room in my house for a 1/6 scale Millennium Falcon? It's like that looks really cool, but like, I'd have no downstairs.
I see one small open space of wall behind you, Mike. You could just fix it there.
Yeah. I don't have, although I suppose when I finally do get this other room completely sort of like cleared out, I could make that like the Michael Jackson room, like people have a room where they have all their stuff, but I don't know. That just seems like a lot of dusting.
And speaking of housekeeping, that'll be a perfect segue to start the episode. You ready for it? Well, hello. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Pencil to Pencil, your favorite pandemic podcast, brought to you Wednesdays at 8 p.m. EST, brought to you by your lovely expert cartoonists and hosts. I am JAMAR Nicholas, Philadelphia's favorite son. Go Phillies! And also the returning hero from Baltimore Comic-Con, and we'll get to that before we bring our ghost sword.
True returning heroes.
Before I bring our ghost sword, you see what I said? That was a Freudian slip. And I would be remiss if I did not introduce my co-host. Spending time with me in Baltimore over the weekend is your favorite web cartoonist and mine, Stone Cold Steve CONLEY. What's up, Steve CONLEY?
Hey guys, good to see you. Great to see you in Baltimore, JAMAR.
Oh,
that was fantastic.
Thank you so much.
JAMAR gave the keynote at the Ringo Awards, and it was spectacular. It was great. It's available to watch. They streamed it on the YouTubes. And
they did.
They did. I think there's a little audio quirks at the beginning, but power through that because JAMAR's keynote was fantastic.
I think the audio got good after I was finished. So you could just,
The guy in the back was with the jack, like, is he done yet?
You could use the theater of the mind and fill in the blanks, but it was a great weekend. And also, we could not complete this trilogy of terror without mentioning the Master Chief of comic illustration, my good buddy Mike Manley. What's up, Mike Manley? Yeah, you're killing me with that doll. Oh
Good
my
evening,
goodness.
ladies and joins, and all the ships at sea, as they used to say in the
Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea. Ships at
yeah.
sea. Yeah, I love it. What up, Shelly? Shelly is one of our ghost pencilers who will not come onto the podcast. Shelly is a fantastic artist with Dick Tracy. She's just like, nah, I'm good.
I don't need to lower myself to go talk to you.
But I love her energy. I love that she hangs out on the podcast. She says, "I was going to ask if the keynote was online yet. Yeah, it's in bits and pieces. But if you want, I can send out the keynote. The PDF is available for viewing." Oh, and also Shelley says that is not a doll. It is a drawing reference. That's what we tell our tax man when we're doing things at the end of the season. That's right. This is not a doll. It is an action figure.
This is the actual drawing reference.
Oh, yo, man! I don't have a modesty strip for that. You might get us canceled.
Well, actually, I was surprised when I have two of these. I have this guy. And I have another guy who has like a little leaner build. They actually came with a bag of penises. It's like, you open it up, you take it. Oh, here's and you have to order the heads. They don't have a head. They just have the body, and you got the different hands. And it was like, oh, there's like a pair of underwear, and then like, oh, a little bag of penises.
Wow, I think I've heard it all. Tonight.
Do they scale with the hands?
Yeah, remember the old G.I. Joe Kung Fu grip? Well, it's applicable.
Hey-o. Well, listen, let's jump right into it because
we've already gone off the rails.
Fantastic. Yeah, because the green room was full, and I don't think I've ordered enough Chex Mix to keep these guys waiting too much longer. But I wanted to give you guys a little primer for what we're doing tonight. We took last week off because Steve and I were kind of making way to Baltimore. But tonight, you guys, we have a special. Oh, what's that?
This is a hardcover of Leon the Extraordinary.
This is hardcover
from your finest retailers, and this is a soft cover.
Wow! Thank you, Steve. Where do I send the PayPal to?
Is the hardcover bigger?
Slightly. I think the art's the exact same size, but hardcovers, dust jackets, they have to add a little bit of space. But
they needed more space to put my photo on the jacket.
Beautiful. It is funny. It is, the colors are spectacular. Your artwork is, as always, wonderful.
Oh,
look how great this is.
Thank you, Steve. You're a good man. I appreciate that. And also, everybody go out and cop that so I can buy a hydrofoil this quarter.
Next year in Baltimore, you'll just be circling in your hydrofoil made out of solid platinum, like a Bond villain.
I love it. So, guys, we have a packed audience. People are they're champing at the bit. They're vibrating to know what we're doing tonight, and I'm going to bring it in. Welcome to Phantomania. This is all Phantom all night long. That's guys, right. we pulled a hat trick. We have a bunch of creators and people who are involved in the legacy strip, The Phantom, created by Lee Falk. And Mike, that is one of your babies that you take care of daily. So I'll let you do the intros to our guests and give us a little bit of rubber for the road and tell us what we're doing tonight.
Well, when I was thinking last week, it would be fun to have my two compatriots, Tony and Jeff, on the podcast, because we have been on the Phantom Fans podcast, but they've never been on this podcast. And I thought it would be fun to have a Skull Cave event and have the creative team on, because Jeff does the Sundays and I do the dailies, and Tony writes both, and they both have separate storylines. So I thought it would be fun to have my fellow fanatics on the podcast tonight.
All right. Well, I think that's a great place to start. So, pencil to pencil ears, please welcome our guests for the night, Tony DePaul and Jeff Weigel. Woohoo! Oh, there we go. Wait,
Hello.
we got everybody. Everybody's here. Hello.
Like the Brady Bunch now.
Hello, guys. Welcome to the podcast. I'm very excited to meet both of you, and
It's good to meet you too.
And I'm sure our audience has a lot of questions. But I'm going to I guess Steve and I are going to kind of hang out in the chat while you guys talk it up. So, Mike, you have the floor.
Okay. Well, I thought we could start out a little bit by having both Tony and then Jeff talk about how they got involved with the Phantom, and how they started working on the strip. I think Jeff and I are like the 7th and 8th, or the 8th and 9th artists to work on.
Yeah, not many.
Yeah, the strip.
Unless you count Ghost.
Right.
then there's a lot.
Right. Yeah. Well, you could afford to pay a Ghost 40 years ago, right?
Back in the day, yeah, sure.
Yeah. But why don't we start out you first, Tony, and talk about how you got involved with the strip, which is pretty interesting, and then Jeff after Tony.
Okay.
All right. Well, the strip came probably about 8 or 9 years after I started writing the Phantom. I had started actually on the overseas books, writing for what was then Semic Press. It's Egmont now in Stockholm. And so, I mean, that's really the only way that I came to the attention of King Features in 1999 when Lee Falk passed away. And they're casting about for someone to step in and write the daily and the Sunday strips.
So you were reading the newspaper strip, and Falk was still writing the strip?
Oh yeah, I mean when I was a kid in the '60s.
Right.
Yeah, I mean I kind of grew up on Cy Barry's art, and that's really where I formed my first impressions of the character. And then I started writing the overseas books for Ulf Granberg, who was the editor at that time. Gosh, I want to say 1992 or so. So it's 30 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time for you.
Yeah, it's been a haul.
And it's worth mentioning that while there have been, what you said, like 9 or 7 or so Phantom artists, as far as I know, there's only been 2 writers. That's you and Lee Falk. Is that correct?
Yeah, on the newspaper strips. Yeah.
Yeah, on the newspaper strips.
Right.
Yeah. And they did have tryouts. There was Ulf had basically organized tryouts for 2 of us who were basically on his team Phantoman, as it is called. And so we kind of went back and forth for I think probably the year 2000. And then I ended up on it as the full-time writer.
So now how did you come to the attention of the guys overseas? Because that seems like and even back then, because the internet was sort of just starting, it's like a hop, skip, and a jump to like get the attention of somebody in Europe, if you're in America, to write foreign versions of an American strip.
Yeah, it was. I think the only reason they took me on was that I was already a professional writer. I was a journalist, and I was working for newspapers. And I had an introduction to an editor at Semic, and gosh, I can't remember her name. Her last name, first name was Lotta. I remember that. The introduction never really went anywhere. I didn't do any work for her, but she ended up introducing me to Ulf, and I did end up working for him. So so I was writing scripts in English starting around 92, I guess. And they were translated into a number of languages, actually, depending on where the artist was. And we worked with artists all over the world, in Argentina and Portugal and Spain, Finland, Norway, Denmark, all over, Germany. So they would get, what I would write would get translated for the artist, first of all, and then it would end up being resold to the Australians, and it would get translated back into English. It made for some really kind of wonky English when it came out the other end. but
yeah, I bet.
It was, it was a great thing for me. I mean, I was married, had a mortgage. We had our 3 daughters like right in a row. And, my wife wanted to be home with the kids. And so for about a dozen years, the Phantom, he saved our bacon. The Phantom did us a lot. In later years, he ended up putting all 3 of my girls through college. So the Phantom's been very, very good to us, as they say.
Yeah. Now,
sounds like you might be getting paid more than me, though. I'm not seeing college money from this.
Now, I know you said you were a fan and you read the stuff, but the thing about a character like the Phantom, who has continually been in print for 87 years now,
right?
There's a lot, and it's a continuity. I mean, it goes straight through from, when he started. There's a lot of reference involved in a character like this. So, were you really familiar with it, or did they go like, here's the Phantom Bible, sit down and read these 9,000 strips,
Well,
and then come back at me with a plot? Or did they give you a plot? I mean, how did that work in the beginning?
Honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of support from King Features on that. But the late Ed Rhodes, who was kind of like a super fan, he had everything on DVD. I think at some point he actually helped King to fill some blank spots in their archives.
Wow.
But he instantly provided me with that material so I could kind of get oriented. I mean, I did remember everything I'd read as a kid, and luckily the first newspaper I worked for carried the Phantom, so I basically read it continuously from probably 1960 on up to probably 1986.
So like the peak Siberia years, basically.
Yes. And I think so highly of Cy. I mean, to my mind, he is really, Lee Falk was a great idea guy. He was the concept man. Cy was the guy who really kind of crystallized that character, and he did it through his art, and that is just astonishing.
I think so too.
Cy really made the Phantom what he is, I think.
Yes, yeah, I agree. And
but to be fair to the earlier artists, Phantom was pretty massively popular during the 40s, I think.
Yeah, it's the heyday, and I'd love to have those 4 big panels every day.
Yeah.
But we get 2. 2 is a big day. Sometimes we might Mike will squeeze 3 in, but
or we
1 or 2.
Like
That's about it.
Yeah, we squeeze a few times.
Yes.
Yeah, but part of that too is that the nature of how people read, and I know we've all talked about this, the nature of how people absorb a comic strip today is very different than how people absorbed a comic strip even 30 years ago, because modern readers are a lot more impatient than people used to be because everything goes faster. And one of the things that's happened to a lot of the continuity strips is they decided to go to 2 panels a day to move the story along, because people were becoming like, what's happening? It seems like the story is not going fast enough. And
well, that doesn't move the story along. That slows it down if you have fewer panels, though, it seems to me.
but it seems to them, I think, that it's faster because it's 2 instead of 3. Like
They kind of want a straight line to the exit, and that's why readers are always trying to guess the end of the story while you're starting the story.
constantly. Yeah, it's very interesting. But there was actually, I would say, about 6-7 years ago, back even when Woody Wilson was still writing Judge Parker, there was talk about speeding up the storylines, because the standard storyline used to be about 12 or 13 weeks would be the length of an average story. And then one of the things that would happen in strips that doesn't necessarily happen now, but when it was the same story in the Sunday and the daily, they would repeat what happened in the Sunday partially on the Monday, because if you didn't get the Sunday strip and something major happened, you would pick up the Monday paper and go like, well, what happened? What, so-and-so's dead or something happened. So,
Right. Saw a lot of that in like Terry and the Pirates.
Right. So, Jeff, why don't you tell us how you got involved with the Ghost Who Walks?
I'm still trying to figure it out, to tell you the truth. I spent 30 years as a graphic designer and a art director, but I had always wanted to do comics. And I had done some. There's an Image title it's called Big Bang Comics. It was an anthology of things, and that was my entry into comics. Because when I approached like Marvel or DC, I could never get arrested by those guys. They always told me I was too old-fashioned. And but I went to a Chicago Comic Con one year and met Gary Carlson, one of the head guys at Big Bang Comics, and he gave me my first work. But that wasn't really something that paid. And after a while, when it was clear that I couldn't get mainstream comics work and I wanted to get paid, I tried children's books. And so I actually did sell a few children's books, and I did spot illustrations for some other things after I got an agent. And I managed to do a handful of graphic novels over the years too. So I had some credentials, although you couldn't call them mainstream credentials by any means. So that's why it's sort of remarkable that I ended up with this gig, because nobody knew who I was. I mean, nobody, except for kids who used to read my graphic novels, I suppose they kind of knew my name, but nobody in the industry did by any means.
Well, Terry Beatty knew, right?
Pardon?
Terry Beatty.
Yes. Well, he didn't actually. I mean, we were Facebook friends, but he didn't know anything about me. But my one connection was a guy named Rick Burchett, who's done tons of work for Marvel and DC. And he's a good friend of mine. He lives over in St. Louis. I'm just on the Illinois side of the river, so we're fairly close, and we see each other every once in a while. And Rick had always been a real booster of my artwork when I was doing graphic novels, or even when I was trying to sell to the big companies. And finally, I just sort of out of the blue one day, 5.5 or so years ago, I got a instant message through Messenger from Terry Beatty saying, I don't tell anybody this, but I'm going to be leaving the Phantom, and I'm looking for guys who might be able to replace me. And would you be interested in doing that? And I couldn't have been more surprised, because he had no reason to know who I was. But I think Rick Burchett put my name in his ear, and probably Terry went to my website and saw some of the stuff I had done. And so he put my name forward as one of about half a dozen different people I think he recommended to King Features. And my thought was, well, I don't have a chance at this. Nobody knows who I am. And there's got to be somebody, especially in this age of comics when there were a lot of out of work, good comics illustrators, right? So I thought, it's really nice to be thought of in the same category as those guys, but I don't have a chance. And then after a month or so, I got a call from King Features. And they started talking to me. They said, we're thinking about you for the fan. Well, they said, Terry gave us your name, and they were asking me a bunch of questions. And I don't remember much about the conversation, to be honest, but they were talking about what would be involved and what kind of deadlines and things like that. And I thought, well, this must be the first interview. And at the end of the interview, they said, well, when can you start? I was like, what? Huh? What? I said, how about right now? And that's how it came about. And I guess a point of pride for me is I got this job without them knowing anything about me other than the fact of my past work that they saw on my website. I think particularly, I had done a kid's graphic novel called Dragon Girl, The Secret Valley. And I had done a continuation of that book as a Sunday strip on my website, as a web comic. It was very much set up like a Sunday newspaper strip. And I suspect that, and I did it just because I didn't have anything else to do. I wasn't getting enough work, right? Mm-hmm. So I decided to throw that at the wall, and just as one to occupy myself, and also as a sort of a teaser so that maybe I could do a sequel to Dragon Girl with Andrews McNeil, who was the publisher of the first one. Well, that never happened, but I think probably between Rick putting my name in Terry Beatty's ear and my having done 6 months of a Sunday strip on Dragon Girl, that was enough proof for them that I could handle myself on the Phantom. And they just dropped it in my lap. It's like the most fortuitous thing that ever happened to me in my life, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, are those Dragon Girl strips still available on your website?
Yeah, they're on. I have a companion website called robotsandquicksand.com, and you can find them there.
Steve will.
But
Steve
if you go to jeffweigel.com, you can also find a link to Robots and Quicksand, and you'll see very clearly where to find those Dragon Girl scripts. And the Dragon Girl graphic novel and all my other graphic novels, too, for that matter, are still available. You can find them on Amazon and things like that.
It's funny, Jeff, that Terry Beatty was in the chat until just a minute ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he had to go get dinner.
Oh.
But that's
well,
great.
It's sort of like a old cartoonist network, because that's kind of how I ended up getting involved in comic strips myself. Is that with Judge Parker, and then the same thing with the Phantoms. Like somebody suddenly passes away or gets sick, they need somebody to fill in. They usually try to go through a network. Hey, do you know somebody? Do you know this person?
Well, you can't get anything without knowing somebody, apparently.
Right.
And yeah. I don't know enough people, so I didn't really get as much work as I would have liked. But it's sure, knowing a couple of people anyway, sure paid off at the end of the day as far as the fandom comes.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, I think Brendan Burford, who was the editor at the time, was pretty familiar with comics and comic books and who's who and people that would fit in with the strips, because we're sort of like, I always liken it to like playing, we're playing King Lear, right? There's already a play, it's already been established. Now it's our version of King Lear, but it has to sort of, and fans are expecting a certain style of the Phantom. They wouldn't want it to look like, you know, an Image comic version of the Phantom.
Yeah.
Or all these other things, especially with the strips. Maybe with the comic books, they do like slightly different versions, but the comic strips are more conservative. They want a certain continuity. I mean, I don't know if they spoke to you about any of that when you started, because I remember they spoke to me about, like, when I took over Judge Parker, they didn't want me to sign my name for a while because they were afraid if the newspapers saw, like, what? Mike Manley, oh no, you know, they'd be calling up somebody and canceling immediately, you know.
Yeah, there was some concern about that when I joined up too. First they said, don't tell anybody, because, you know, the newspapers often use a change of artist to drop the strip. So, you know, it's just going to happen quietly. And so I couldn't tell anybody. I was, you know, I was dying to tell everybody that I passed on the street, but you know, I couldn't tell anybody until the first strip ran, and so, and what the advice that they gave me is, well, they didn't actually give me advice. They just said, yeah, so, you know, what everybody does is they just try and imitate the last guy who was there for a while, and then their own style creeps in eventually. And I said, yeah, I understand that's how it works. And then I just threw that out the window. I didn't do that. I just went in full bore as me, which frankly, it was a pretty decent fit anyway, because like I said, I couldn't get arrested by the Marvel and DC because they said I was too old fashioned. I was told by an editor who shall remain nameless, I was too Kurt Swan, Reed Crandall for. Yeah. So, and I'm like, that's a bad thing? I don't understand this at all.
That hurts, but thank you.
But I think
did they ever say anything like that to you, Tony? Like when you took over the newspaper strip, did they give you any like guidelines? Did they say like these kind of stories, not these kind of stories? Did they give you the similar thing?
Well, not really, but I think that had to do with the fact that I basically had two different editors when I started. I mean, Jay Kennedy really looked to Ulf Granberg in Stockholm to ensure continuity. I mean, Ulf knew way more about the Phantom than anybody at King ever did. And so he kind of served as an interim editor. And I basically started writing for the paper stories that I had been writing for Ulf. As a matter of fact, we adapted a few of them, if I remember right.
Really?
Stories that had already run in Scandinavia. And yeah, I remember rewriting a few of those in the daily format. And so Ulf was kind of like he kind of served as an unpaid editor for probably a year and a half, and he kind of got us through that difficult time. But no, the only thing I've ever heard from King is, "We love it. Keep doing what you're doing. Just keep it going."
Well, so I'm sort of interested in the fact that you have someone who's like a super fan, but sort of like the Stan Lee of Finland or something, right? I mean, he's like really into this particular character.
Yeah.
And then you start adapting the stuff. Like I always said, there's a lot of research in this character because it's a continuous continuity for all these years. So when you would come up with an idea, would they say, okay, but you know, it has to be these people, or this is what the tribe is, or you can't go over in this area, or if the Phantom goes here, it has to be these people. I mean, there's a lot.
Not really. No, I guess I probably already knew enough of the basics. You know, how the Maori tribe was different from the Longo tribe and that sort of thing. So it was really kind of seamless. Now, that said, it was in the day when we were still following Lee Falk's pattern, basically, as far as it concerned the length of the stories. I mean, we would do 3 daily stories a year and 2 Sunday stories. And that really, I'd say 4 or 5 or 6 years into my tenure, I started to think that this is just really way too predictable. Everyone is looking for a kind of a plot turn around week 14, then a couple of weeks of denouement, and you're out of it. And, a lot of those folk stories kind of had the same beat to them,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of those fans want that. A lot of them want predictability, and I kind of thought that's an older audience. That's not the, that we can't be kind of following the template of these 1960 stories if we want the script to be around in another generation. So
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why we're doing longer stories now. And Mike's point about people are impatient. Yeah, we're trying their patience right now.
Yes.
But I think that's a good thing because I think we're getting new readers. I mean, I hope we are.
So Tony,
Or we're engaging the old readers in a different way.
So Tony, to that point, James from YouTube, Steve says where they're from. I like that. James says to Tony, writing it for so long, how do you keep it fresh and stay true to the character? Kind of piggybacking off of what you're just talking about.
Well, I mean, I'll never run out of ideas. I mean, the ideas just kind of fall out of the sky and hit you in the head, I've got notes files that go on forever on stories I would like to do, I haven't done yet. And, I could easily add a dozen of those a week, just waking up in the morning,
Wow, that's good.
I think I texted Mike, did I text you in the last couple of days when I was up really early and said, and said, I just heard a phantom line in my sleep and I had to go downstairs and put it in my notes file. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'll write this, into old age, which will be in like the next 5 minutes or so.
Yeah. You're kind of optimistic there, Tony.
How old was Lee Falk? Was he, I don't know, his late 80s or something? But,
in his 80s somewhere, I think, but I don't know.
Yeah, maybe 80, mid 80s, I don't know.
Yeah.
So he never had a ghostwriter? He never had anybody like Don F. Glute, I think, used to write for Stan Lee or one of those guys, it said Stan Lee, but it wasn't him.
The only people who would know that would be the Chronicle Chamber guys down under. Jermaine would know that. I'm not aware of it if he ever had anyone write.
No,
for
he
him.
means you, Tony. Have you ever had?
Right?
Oh, me?
No.
Right?
Me? No, never. No,
Yeah.
no. It's all no. It all came from here.
Yeah,
So-
I just wondered if Falk did too, because there's a lot of stuff probably in the 60s. You said he was trying to write plays and do all these other.
Yeah, I think the Phantom strip basically bankrolled a lot of other projects for him, and newspapers were the only game in town, and I think it was really lucrative for him. But he was trying to make his mark on Broadway, so he's writing and producing and directing.
Yeah.
And,
Plus, he had with Mandrake too. I mean, those are two popular strips.
They were
and back in that day, he probably made a pretty good living just from those.
Yeah, but if I've heard some of Cy Barry's podcasts on the Chronicle Chamber, and to hear Cy tell it, it's not a very flattering picture of Lee Falk.
Yeah,
I mean, basically what Cy got was very bare bones, and it was kind of like the stories. Falk would kind of forget that these characters were in the story, and so I really think that was kind of that was really the genesis of Cy Barry making the strip his. And that's why we really owe so much to Cy. I don't think we can overstate that.
Yeah.
But I mean, without Psy, I think the Phantom would have been gone 30 years ago, and he would have been a completely different character. He would have been just one of these dark, haunted, troubled personalities. You know, he would have been a Punisher, a Batman, and just indistinguishable from those other kinds of characters.
Yeah.
I'd have zero interest in writing them. You know, the fact that he's a completely different kind of character. That's what makes him interesting to me.
For people who don't know, what makes him different? What is that? What is that quality? All right.
Well, he's
not giving the secret sauce away.
Yeah, no. Well, he's completely untroubled by what he does, and the fact that he's carrying on a family legacy, I think, just makes him a different sort of thing.
He enjoys his work too.
Yeah,
he really does.
It's not about revenge. He likes what he's doing. This is fun.
He's completely against revenge, and you know, people call him a vigilante. He's not at all a vigilante. I mean, a vigilante is someone who sort of despairs of the ability of institutions to bring about justice. The Phantom is nothing like that. I mean, he's like, the president is his best friend, Lamanda Luaga. Mm-hmm. He's the secret commander of a law enforcement agency. I mean, he supports the institutions that make Bangala a livable place. So, so I think he's just really got his head screwed on right. And I think of him as was what Michael Herr, I guess, said of Sean Flynn, a Vietnam War correspondent. I think I have to reread this book. I think he said he had, quote, shockingly good mental health. And that's the Phantom to me. That's what makes the Phantom different. I mean, the Punisher is just a sociopath and a homicidal maniac. Batman can't get over anything. You know, I just think that those are really those are characters that tend to be, they just make you think of like 13-year-old socially maladaptive readers, boys generally.
Right.
And the Phantom's just not that kind of character whatsoever.
And Batman actually wasn't that kind of character either.
That's right. When I read Batman as a kid, you're right. He was not that Dark Knight, haunted personality.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I always sort of think of Phantom as Neil Adams Batman, Neil Adams era Batman. That's sort of, they had the same approach to their work, it seems to me.
Yeah, and that Batman supported the police department,
right?
Which the Phantom does. I mean, if the Phantom apprehends you and roughs you up, he doesn't give you two in the hat out in the jungle somewhere. He drops you off at the PD, and you're found on the steps in the morning. So. Yeah, that was sort of the Batman of old, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that's. I mean, the older Batman also had a sense of humor. He had a more well-rounded personality. I think it was the interpretation of the post-Dark Knight stuff that turned him into that guy who was like always grim and angry and constantly more angry, and then like even more later on he would get like more angry.
It's just it's like a hamster wheel. It never goes anywhere.
Right. Yeah. And then they took the Phantom, when they would put him into the comic books, I should say, they would skew him towards that as well, because that sort of became like the template for all modern male characters. Is that they're all angry, they're all vengeful, they all have gritted teeth, they're all badasses,
I can remember when I would read the other companies' interpretations of, I guess Marvel did a series, and I know DC did a series. And when I read those, I was like, who the hell is this guy? This isn't the Phantom.
Yeah. Well, you know, some artists on the overseas books, they draw that angry phantom, which just is not the character.
No,
I know,
it's not right.
and not even overseas. Some of the treatments on outside publishing houses here in the U.S. I know I was asked to blurb one of those books once, and I said, "Well, send me the book and the script or whatever, and I'll look at it." And I didn't get past the second page. So I don't know who this character is.
Well, you know, one of the things that really attracted me, what made me feel really happy to be working on the Phantom is he's still the same guy he was during the Cy Berry era.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, so there's like 1,000 different Batmans now, 1,000 different Supermans, and I can't relate to those characters at all anymore because I don't even know who they are. I've seen so many different versions. I know who the Phantom is. He's been the same guy all along. It's really an honor to be able to carry that, to keep carrying that forward. That same guy, that same character.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to do it.
Yeah, I agree, and like I think I sort of felt like when I took over the strip, you kind of like Cy Berry moved out of the house, but you want to keep the house up. You know, you want to keep it in shape. And that's not really the same way in comics, because comics is sort of like, well, here's Neil Adams' version, and then here's, you know, the Frank Miller's version, and then here's Jim Lee's version, and they don't necessarily always jive with each other. And you know, but this is actually the same guy, and I also think that the Syndicate wants people who will keep the character, the tone, the strip the same. And the fans, that's the other thing. I never met or had the experience with people who were as passionate as the fans of this particular strip, more so than comic book fans. You have people that were like, you know, like my dad's age. My dad's going to turn 90. He's been reading the Phantom since he was a kid. There are people who've been reading the strip literally for 60, 70 years. You know what I mean? It's like, it's really hard to imagine you're a fan of something. You've enjoyed something. You know, did you follow your favorite team? Nobody has followed in literature outside of comic strips anything that's consistently been made for that length of time.
And it's not that it hasn't changed. It's I mean, that's always the question. What that's like the Bob Seger question, like, right? What to leave in, what to leave out. But Falk, in the 70s, he started to evolve this thing. I mean, I think he realized it couldn't remain stuck in the 30s and 40s. And I mean, this kind of coincides with African nations gaining their independence. You know, colonialism is in decline. And
well,
so
to hear Cy tell it.
I'm sorry?
I said to hear Cy tell it, Cy had a lot to do with that updating of the sensibility of the strip in terms of, you know, how they treated Africans, and, you know, they couldn't just be guys running around in loincloths like it was a 1930s Tarzan movie anymore. And Cy really had a lot to do with, like, updating what Mautan was like and things like that.
Right. All of that, you're right. All of that needed Lee's participation, but a lot of it originated with Cy. It is true.
It's a testament to how well you're able to maintain an audience, that they can keep reading, although sensibilities have changed. I mean, they weren't watching NCIS, you know, 50 years ago, but they're fans of that show now. Watch and now read the Phantom and love it. There's a question for Julie.
You know, way back when, there definitely was a, and we're still criticized for it to this day in some quarters, but, you know, in an unjustified way, I think. but there was this kind of white savior thing going on in the 30s and 40s. You know, nowadays the Phantom is not, he's not a lawgiver. He's not revered by the jungle people. I mean, he is basically, he's not over the culture. He's in the culture. I mean, when he speaks to the Bandar, he speaks in Bandar. You know, he doesn't speak in English or any European language. So it's pretty clear nowadays that he's pretty dependent on the society that he operates in. You know, he's really a part of it. So
yeah, he's not their king anymore. He's their neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the stuff in the 30s and 40s was pretty disgraceful, and it was a product of its time, where the you know, the tribal chiefs were kind of clowns, and he would occasionally go out there and like crack their heads together, and he would bring order, and you know, it was all, I mean, it was more Rudyard Kipling than anything we know today that most people would want to read. So yeah, so I think that started to change. I mean, that changed in the 60s, really. And Bengala started to seem like a much less colonial place. You had Colonel Warubu, who was running the Jungle Patrol. And, you know, you also had, I mean, Diana was working at the UN, you know. She wasn't, you know, cooking up the Phantom's jungle goulash or whatever it is he chows down on, you know. So,
but to be fair, Diana was a pretty strong character from the first day of the strip.
Exactly.
Early on. I think maybe I can't vouch for like later in the 40s and 50s because I haven't seen those, but you know, I have seen the first year of it, and she was supposed to be, you know, Rosalind Russell or one of those types
it's in the very first week of the strip in 1936, and she's training in boxing, and basically her trainer, you know, this big beefy guy, does like no mas. Yeah. Not enough, you know. Yeah. So you know, Falk was onto that early. He always wrote strong female characters, and
well, I think the culture had that. Like in the mid 30s. You had, you know, Betty Davis and Katharine Hepburn and all those sorts of movie stars who were actually, you know, strong women. And that sort of went away by, I don't know, late 40s.
Yeah.
And then everybody was Donna Reed.
After the war, after the war. Yeah.
Right.
Lois Lane went through the same evolution too, right?
In those days, you know?
Yeah.
With the picket fence and all that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you were right, Tony. I think if they did not change the tone of the Africans in the strip probably would have ended because it would have been very anachronistic. It would have been very, very racist. And that's actually something I know you mentioned that Jeff thinks a lot about, but I think a lot about too, is like how you depict the African characters in the strip. And thank God for Google, because I mean, like, you can actually look up pygmies, you can look up African villages, pictures of things. So it's not, you know, back in the 40s or the 50s, probably even the 60s. I mean, it would have been much more standard to draw, you know, something that was really right out of the pulps, you know, like Bwana, you know, angry mountain god, scream fire, you know, that was really standard. And it would have been a little more difficult to do research on what tribes were like. I mean, now you can just go, oh, Pygmy tribe Africa, Pygmy tribe by country, and you know, you see all these pictures, and that was one of the interesting things about the strip to me, was doing having to do the research, which you of course are a great help, and the Phantom fans are help too, is like seeing how Garan changed over the years. His size actually changed over the years. I don't know if you noticed that, Jeff, like the difference in his appearance.
I had decisions to make about dealing with the Bandar, because just the idea, I think originally the idea of them being pygmies was sort of problematic anyway. I mean, there are tribes that are pygmies, but you could kind of sense that it was just a way to sort of demean them at the beginning of the strip, you know, back in the 30s and like that. And it was hard for me to figure out how to depict them without making them Oompa Loompas, you know? That's kind of the role that they used to fill in the strip.
Right.
And I have also tended towards making them a little taller than maybe they should be. And I don't know if that's the right decision, but I just wanted to give them a little more stature than I'd seen they had in the past. So now when I draw them, they're more sort of short guys than they are pygmies.
Do you have any art handy on the work you did with the two Maori girls who go on their adventure in Mawatan?
Yeah. And that's a good example, because that storyline was sort of predicated on me wanting to do some dignified tribal folks. Hold on a second, I'll pull it out of the drawer.
Sure. So while Jeff's doing that, Tony, we've been trying to get your attention for a while to answer this question. Do you still have that, Steve? Yeah. So Shelly, whoa.
Timber.
We didn't lose him, do we?
Yeah, hopefully he'll be back.
How much of me is the Phantom? Well, oh my gosh, not much. Let's say. I mean, if you write fiction, that question always comes up. How much of it is veiled autobiography? I know I wrote a screenplay once where, well, for something I know about, which is motorcycling, long distance motorcycling, I thought I want to write a story about this, but I don't want people to think it's me. So it can't be a 60-something male. So I said my protagonist is going to be a 15-year-old girl. And I wrote this story, and you'd be surprised how many people said to me, this is kind of your inner 15-year-old girl you're writing about, isn't it?
So no matter what, you're going to make it about you, right?
So everything kind of gets read as autobiography, and that just comes with the territory. You know? If you know something about your subject matter, which every writer should, you know.
There's Maori girls there.
Yeah.
Let's see what.
So how much time did you spend doing, like gathering hairstyles and reference and things like that?
All I can say is some. I don't remember, because I did this a few years ago. I don't remember for sure, but I know that when I did character sketches for the two girls, and I did find a couple of photos that I based both of them on. As far as hairstyles, I found, and I also, when I started the strip too, I bought a bunch of like coffee table books on Africa and on rainforests to just sort of browse through and get a feeling for what I was shooting for. But yeah, if I have main characters, I almost always try and find some sort of reference photo of a person.
Yes.
And they might be kind of famous, or they might just be anonymous things that pop up on Google. But I will try and find something so that I have a picture of this person in my head. And that was the case for these two girls, for sure.
Great. That's great, Jeff.
That was a fantastic story. Yeah, you did a wonderful job on that.
And also, that's a nice
the
shirt.
other thing I looked for was, if you look at this king, let's see, where is he?
Right
over
there.
here, you'll notice like the facial scarring on this guy was something that that I found from reference too, the sort of decorative facial scarring that you see on him, and that hat too. And I was trying to find authentic things. The hat I would change if I had it to do over again. It doesn't feel quite right to me at this point, but I was looking for things other than just headbands with feathers and loincloths.
Right.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the things I was interested in also was like how they built their houses, how the houses are shaped.
Yeah.
Like, different tribes have different houses. They have different shapes. There's different shapes of houses in the village.
Mm-hmm.
Like how people build things. Again, it's like you can just default to standard jungle people reference made up from Tarzan, right? But like there are very few remote people left anymore in the world now, too. And if you're drawing somebody in Africa, they've got a satellite, they've got a cell phone, and there's hardly anybody left.
That's right. Yeah, you look up Africans, and they're all wearing like American sports teams T-shirts and things like that. So you got to dig a little deeper to find stuff that's actually more tribal. But you can find it. It's not hard to find.
Or like it's a mix.
Ultimately.
Like you said, they're weering like the losing team that they thought was going to win the World Series. They dumped those shirts in Africa. And the guy's wearing like,
right.
The Yankees 2018 World Series championship. And then like
right.
a handmade rest of us, is a tribal outfit. But they'll have like one, like a Batman t-shirt.
I have another question, which I think this is all really fantastic. And as I like to say, where's the time go? We're already an hour in.
Oh, geez, so we are.
We're an hour in.
That's amazing.
See, I told you guys, it's like it's breezy. Our good buddy, Notorious JRD, J. Robert Deans from YouTube asks, is there ever bleed through between the daily and Sunday storylines? And does one influence or inform the other? I'd like to hear from all three of you if I can.
Well, I can tell you that I am certainly influenced by, I don't know about the storylines, but I'm influenced by Mike's art a lot. I'm trying to think of an example. I can't speak for him, but I know I see days when he's going, oh man, that's really good. I'm going to have to do better. And that's, I think that's the main way I'm influenced by the Daily Strip.
Well, thank you. I mean, I feel the same. I feel the same way. And I think I was influenced in the way that you handled Devil.
Oh, yeah.
He's a very interesting character to me because when I started the strip and you start doing research, he's supposed to be a mountain wolf, whatever that is. But
yeah, I don't know what the hell a mountain wolf is.
But then you look at him and he looks like a German Shepherd.
Right.
Half the time. Or like just like a brown dog. Like not even like a big dog, but just like a regular dog.
I knew from day one when I started the strip, I said, this is not a German Shepherd. It's a great big goddamn wolf, and I'm going to draw him that way.
Wolves are big animals.
Yeah, they are. And I don't always get the scale right, I have to admit, but that was one very conscious decision I made when I started.
Yeah.
Well, three summers ago, I was on the motorcycle going up the Dempster Highway in Canada to the Arctic Ocean, and Devil stepped out of the brush.
Oh, really?
Probably 100 yards ahead of me. They're impressive at 100 yards.
Well, I'll tell you what. I walked into a PetSmart one day to buy cat food or something, and people walk there, take their animals in there with them. This guy had a wolf.
Wow.
There was a guy in there with a wolf, and that thing was big. It's like its back came up to, close to his belt level. They're big animals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, people forget that all of our domestic dogs are basically puppy versions of wolves. We bred down. Even a German Shepherd is much smaller than a wolf.
Mhm.
You know, all those dogs are much smaller versions of wolves. But yeah, that's one thing that I mean, I think this must be a interesting question for you, Jeff, too, is like the amount of research you had to do when you start on a strip like this, because you know, if you look through the PDFs, the Phantom guys are great. They sent me a bunch of PDFs. I had some stuff, you know, you do research, you realize that over the course of, let's say, Cy Berry's run, you look at the skull cave and it changed size, it changed shape. Garan was taller, then he was shorter, and then his head was bigger, and then it was
Right.
smaller. And you know, you're on the clock, right? Because like when they go like you're hired, right? You're like, you got to start running full bore. There's no downtime. And there's a lot of research on a strip like this that is really inconsistent over the period of even like 10 years. In the 60s, things changed. Like you mentioned earlier, Cy Berry had ghosts who were helping him either pencil or ink things, you know. I heard like Carmen Infantino and people like that were helping him at times. Well,
and you know what? I find those inconsistencies to be very relaxing when I deal with continuity. I figure, you know, nobody complained about it back then. So if I get the scale on the skull cave off a little bit, I'm okay with that. And I haven't had anybody call me on it really. So
yeah. In the beginning, I thought the skull cage myself, I thought it was actually bigger. And then I saw one strip that had the Phantom and Garan standing next to each other outside in the mouth of the skull cave.
Yeah.
And it was about, if the Phantom is say like 6'2", 6'3", it was probably about 10 or 12 feet, the opening. But in the beginning, I thought it was like much bigger. So, and
that's about what I shoot for, is like 12 feet, 15 feet, something like that.
Yeah. And then, so it was very interesting to, and I know Tony and I have talked about this too, is that the technology in the strip now makes the strip also exceedingly different from the way it was 20 years ago, because you know, Phantom lives in a world where there's satellite imagery of Google Maps of everything, satellite phones. It's really different. Like, he uses a computer. So I know, you know, now Paul Ryan had that weird computer with the giant square keys on it, and I was like,
the keyboard was as big as an ironing board, basically.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, and so I decided, like, well, okay, this is an interesting question. The Phantom has a computer, and he has a giant screen, flat screen in his cave, and so he must have a satellite. But does he know about all this technology, or is there a young Bandar guy who went off to college?
Yeah. You can't worry about that too much, though. That's Tony's thing to worry about. So,
but you know, I would think about things like that when I'm drawing it. Like, well, it's like with Batman's Batcave, he had to kill a lot of people because, like, this guy came in and put in the door, this guy put in the nuclear pile.
Yeah,
sorry, you know, he's like tossing people down in Batcave, right?
Alfred was just a really handy guy. He could do all that stuff.
I guess so.
Let me interrupt a second, because I think maybe we left something unanswered. I think it was Jamar asked a question of all three of us, and I think I answered, but we didn't get to you guys, you other two guys answer. And I don't even remember what that question was. Can you repeat what you were asking us before?
It was about the bleed from the weekday to the weekend.
Oh, right.
Like Sunday to the daily. Like how much the two storylines affect each other.
Did we address that to everyone's satisfaction?
They're the same. We've definitely made some reference back and forth. You know, well, right now, a lot of this current daily story is about Savarna Devi and her imprisonment in Rhodia. But we've had a Sunday story, which basically set the foundation for why she's imprisoned in Rhodia. Basically, they sank her, the Rhodian military sank her ship. So she went on a killing spree and found every officer and pilot and co-pilot and navigator who was involved in this, and she wiped them out.
Right.
So that has never appeared in the daily, but Terry Beatty did that story for us in the Sunday side. So
Yeah, and I know that there have been references to daily strip events that I've had to include in Sunday strips. The one that comes specifically to mind is Heloise's battle with the Nomad.
right.
And Jeff,
I
you
did have to
showed a piece of Jeff. You showed a piece of artwork that looked like it was done traditionally, but you were saying also now you're working largely in Procreate. Did you transition to digital?
Well, I've switched back and forth virtually since I started the strip. I've been working in Procreate exclusively for the last, I'm going to guess, 8 months, because it was more convenient for things that were going on in my life. Also, I should say it's easier. I just like working in it a little bit more. I can blow things up as large as I want to on the screen. I can move things around easily. It's so much easier to make corrections. I don't have to scan the art in 2 pieces and then lace it together in Photoshop. There's just tons of reasons why it's more convenient for me to do the artwork. And also, I kind of like the results better, too. There's something, my art seems to lose something in the scan somehow. It seems nice and crisp when I do it on paper, but when I scan it in, that crispness doesn't come across the way it does in Procreate. I mean, in Procreate, what you see is what you get when you lay a line down. And so there's a sort of a precision to those that I find a little more satisfying. The other advantage to that is I'm not chained to the drawing board. I don't know. I've just had a lot of reason to want to be able to work on a portable device in the last 8 months, rather than be chained to a drawing board. You'd be shocked to find out how much of the strip in the last 8 months has been drawn in hospital waiting rooms, emergency wards, hospital rooms, because my wife was very sick during those times, and so it was a great. It was a real help to be able to sit in the living room and keep an eye on her while I drew the strip, rather than to have to go downstairs. And so,
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. Do you have any more art you can show? Any more originals there? You think?
Yeah, if we can talk about a little process, if you want to. Generally, when I get script, the first thing I do is try and storyboard as much of the script as I have. So I'll try and, I'm sorry, not storyboard, thumbnail sketch, a bunch of weeks at a time. So that gives me, for one thing, I can lay out the strip and decide how the panels are going to lay out without wasting a lot of time. Because this is a thumbnail sketch right here. There's not much to it. It's really rough. I can't see what I'm doing. I have to stand up here. It's a very rough drawing. To some degree, it's only discernible to me what the hell's going on there. But at least I get the storytelling beats and I figure out how to show what I need to show very quickly this way.
Right.
And even though they're crudely drawn, if it's an easy week and I figure it out pretty quickly, then it takes about 10 minutes to do one of these. but it may take even like 20 minutes for me to really figure out how I want to tell the story, you know, what the camera angle is going to be, and whether it's a long shot or a close up or whatever. So that's what this is for. So a lot of the storytelling problems get solved at this stage.
Right.
Then the next stage is rough pencils. And that's this. Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
And
that's beautiful.
Yeah,
even my pencils are not as tight as, say, Mike's are when I see his on Facebook. But there's just enough. What I'm doing here is making sure I've got the anatomy right, and making sure that the compositions are really what they're supposed to be. And I will, like Mike and his, will plan where his blacks are going to fall. I try and get a sense of that, but I haven't really planned that out at this stage too much.
Hey, Jeff.
Yep.
Our friend JRD asks, do you use a panel template or do you draw your own panels based on your own pacing?
Now the panel template is generated in, and the lettering too is generated in InDesign. Okay, and so I never have to actually draw the panel borders. It's a lot more precise and a lot easier, to be honest, to do that there. And you'll see what I'll do is I have a template with whatever title panel I have for that given storyline, because I change it with each story, and I print that out in blue line, and then just start sketching with pencil in here with a plain old number 2 pencil is all I ever use. And just to give you a sense of what sort of detail goes into these things, you can see it's not really super detailed. It's just enough that I'm confident to ink from it, is what it amounts to.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And so once this is done, I will take it into InDesign, and I will add the word balloons. I do the lettering and the word balloons. And at that stage in Photoshop, I may like move a figure over or shrink something down a little bit to make room for the copy, so that everything sort of works together. And I haven't painted myself into a corner. And then what I'll do is, after I've got that, I will print out on 2 sheets of 11 by 17 Bristol board those pencils, only I'll print them out in blue line, very light blue line. So then I can work right over the top of them. I never have to erase any pencil marks or anything like that. And the word balloons and the panel borders, I will actually leave in black. So when I print those things out in 2 halves, you see these things are in 2 halves.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Then I can still have the the word balloons in there in black and the panel borders, but everything else, all the rest of the drawing itself is in blue line. And I just ink over the top of that and add the rest of the detail. And you can see here, I've made decisions in ink about, where to spot blacks and things like that, that weren't evident in the pencils.
Right. And then that way your original has the lettering on it.
Yes, then the original has the lettering on it. And then, so once it comes out of the printer in 2 sheets, I just lace it together and tape it up the back with masking tape.
I love it. That's fantastic.
What's interesting is that with all that beautiful artwork, Jeff is also at the same time one of those rare artists who says, give me all the text you want. Just load the story up. We'll make it work. And I'm always really conscious of, I don't want to give them, Mike or Jeff, a whole lot of text, because, the art sells it. To me, that's what people want.
Tony and I have had this discussion before, and he keeps telling me that the art sells it, and I keep telling him none of it works without a good story.
Right.
because you've seen, I'm sure you guys have seen like things where the great Neil Adams did a comic book, and it kind of sucks, even though the artwork is good. But if the story's not there, by the time you're finished with it, you're kind of like, well, that was stupid. Why was I even here?
Right.
Well, yeah, the story needs to be there, but in as condensed a form as possible, I think.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's got to hold together. A lot of times, I think I am kind of relying on readers to see some subtext in there too. I kind of think of it as it kind of makes the writing a lot more work to try to pack the story. I mean, was it Shelley who said load each rift with ore? Or maybe it was Keats. I don't remember, but the story's got to be there.
Not a lot of Shelley and Keats references on Pencil to Pencil.
Well, it's the things the Augustinians beat into your head, yeah, load each rift with ore. That's been stuck in my head for 50 years. So I try to get the story there and get it in a real condensed way, and not create any throwaway language.
Well, I remember reading that Roy Crane, the great Roy Crane, would say, you basically rewrite. He would rewrite his dialogue, paring it down, right?
All the time.
Yeah, but I to feed into the question that was asked. Now you're working with two different artists, and we both have different strengths. So as a writer now that you've known us for several years, do you imagine in your head when you're writing like, oh, this is a Jeff scene or this is a Mike scene?
Oh.
You know what I mean? Do you think about that when you're writing your scripts?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, of course, every artist has the things that they're best at, and even among great artists, one might be a little better at this thing than the other. But no, I don't think I've ever written a daily story where I said, I don't think Jeff could pull this off in the Sunday, so this will be Mike's story, or vice versa. I just, it's kind of the story. The story is what it is, and I know both of you guys are going to do an outstanding job with it.
Yeah, because I feel like we gel. Like I feel like you know what I do, so I feel like when I get the scripts, that you're thinking, like, oh, there's going to be a nice vista. I like to draw. One of the things I like to draw is the backgrounds and the environment. I think that's really important in the script, or else it seems sort of like, the fake Africa, where you just draw like, I'm going to just stick a hippo in here, and then the next panel, I'm going to stick an orangutan, and then the next panel, I'm going to stick, a lion, and it's like, well, lions are not down here with the hippos. That, that's some other place.
Your backgrounds. I can recall a couple of occasions where you completely surprised me with something where I thought it probably would have been a close shot on a character, and then I saw the way you did it with elephants and all these other things, and landscape, and it worked beautifully. So yeah, so I like to. I'm always surprised by the both of you, and it's surprised in a good way. It's always.
I'm glad you added that.
Yeah. It always looks. My writing style is that I'm going to try to tell the story in images because, I mean, it is sequential art. But it's the artist that decides what that final image is going to be. And there's all these other considerations that I don't need to think about, like composition and that sort of thing. Although I do tend to tell it almost like in a director type of way, like in pictures, I've never had the experience where I thought, oh, the artist did something different, that's wrong. I'm always surprised in a good way. And I can always see why you did it.
Really, I've wondered about that actually. Sometimes I wonder, I don't know if Tony intended it to be staged this way. I wonder how he feels about that.
Yeah, no, I always understand completely why you did what you did once I see the finished work. And it's always great. It's better than I could hope for. So, but
now I have another question for both of you guys that I thought is sort of interesting. And when you were talking about, touched on it a little earlier with the Jeff did it with about using actors or actresses. So do either one of you in your head have an actor that is the Phantom? That is like if you're gonna cast the movie, because you can't get.
I can tell you I don't, because Cy Berry defined him so well. I know what the shape of his nose is supposed to be, and I don't need an actor for that, because Cy Berry was very. It's like Kurt Swan's Superman, I mean, what the guy looks like. If you saw him walking down the street, you'd say, that's him right there. So for the Phantom, I never had to look for a model.
Sometimes that will occur to me with secondary characters. And in some of the weeks that are in the pipeline for you, Mike, I did suggest, I said, I don't know who you will see this character as. To me, it's Viola Davis.
Okay.
So we'll see if you think so when you get those weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, not for the Phantom. I don't know any actors who as Jeff said, look like Cy Berry's Phantom.
Well, I actually know. I'm pretty sure that Cy started using Steve Holland, the famous model for all.
Well, everybody did.
Right, and you can see
everywhere.
that very distinctive way that he drew. Holland had of the filter, his mouth and everything. I'm very convinced that he used him as the model for the Phantom. And so I started using him. I would just scour the internet and get as many photos of him. I'm pretty, because he has a very distinctive, and Terry's right.
Terry Beatty is back.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so this guy was the face of every hero, and sometimes all the villains. Like
Yeah. He was everywhere in the 60s.
Yeah. He was
Doc Savage primarily, but he was on he was the figure on the Naked Ape back then, which was a big bestseller. Everybody seemed to use him.
Yeah, even Tom Palmer, the Marvel guy, used him in the 80s when he was fairly up there in years. He modeled right up until he was, I think, probably in his late 60s or 70s. I just got a book on him that was out. But I was convinced that Cy was using him as the model for the Phantom. It seemed like a lot of artists, did that, because it gives you sort of a way of drawing. Because I don't know if you feel the same way, Jeff, but like in the beginning, he said more of like an egg head, like an egg shape to his head, and then his head was not quite as round later on. I noticed, like, if you look at Cy Berry stuff in the beginning, and then you look at his stuff by the end of the 60s, that's sort of what I feel is like the classic.
Well, that's because in the overseas books, he's constantly being hit over the head.
Got no prefrontal lobe left at all.
He's constantly outwitted by nitwits. They're knocked unconscious. So
I know what you're talking about,
that
Mike,
may have
because
flattened it out a bit.
that there's a sort of slope to his forehead in Cy Berry's work that always looked right, that I could never achieve. I when I would try that, he just looked like he was without a brain. And I finally just gave it up and said, I got to draw the head shape the way it works for me. I just couldn't quite get, and Paul Ryan would draw him like that too. It had sort of a small, yeah, he just had sort of a small cranium up there.
Yeah.
That I could never quite get a bead on.
Mm.
So I like to think I gave him a normal head. He's smarter now.
Guys, we're running out of time, and as I said, this will be a really breezy episode. You guys have done fantastic. If you have time for a couple more questions,
Lightning round.
I'm going to
Lightning round.
institute lightning round, question palooza. So we have a couple of questions in the queue that I would like if you could just give some quick, snappy answers to. But I have a couple questions of my own. My first question is, because there's so many people that are touching on this character, besides just in the States, globally, is there kind of like an Illuminati of Phantom creative, like who kind of, like a hive mind that controls all these properties to a degree? Because I was thinking about the Defenders of the Earth. I'm thinking about how the reach of the Phantom overseas, and also what you guys are doing with King. So how does that all work? Is there like committee meetings, or you guys just do what you want to do? How does that work?
No.
Yeah.
So King's like super hands off with this strip from everything I can tell.
Yeah.
I've never had a single note from them. Like the Phantom shouldn't look like this, or
Right.
he shouldn't be not.
Right.
That's unheard of. I don't know if you guys have had that experience.
Watch
No,
that big forehead.
The only thing that's understood is that the stuff that's published by King is the canon, but they're kind of loose. I think they're trying to tighten it up a bit now, but they were at one time, pretty hands off with the outside publishers as well. And then now I think they think that it really does dilute the character, and they're trying to tighten up on that a bit.
Yeah. But to give you an example of how loose they can be with canon, the story that we did was just the last one, the one that occurs in the Phantom's chamber of costumes.
Yeah, the Visitor.
Yeah, the Visitor. Phantom creates this special chamber in the cave for displaying the costumes of his ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And it occurred to me when I got that script, it was like, well, they're all going to look like exactly the same. How do you tell a 17th century Phantom costume from an 18th century costume? And so I made modifications. I did, each one was a little bit different for each new guy. And I wondered, if I was going to get slapped on the wrist for that attempt. But I never heard a word from King Features, even though it sort of defies the way this character's been treated in the past. They never balked. I never heard a word about it. I honestly, I'm not sure that it even occurred to anybody down there that this was something different from what had been done in the past. And then it came down to whether the fans were going to like it or not. And for the most part, they lived with it just fine too, except for a couple of complaints from really old-time diehards.
Cool.
So it's, there's no Bible that I'm aware of.
Okay, cool. So my next question is for me, JAMAR, on StreamYard. I have a question because I know that the Phantom is super, super, super popular overseas, and it kind of reminds me of how giant soccer is everywhere else but the United States. And it's catching on, and obviously there's Phantom fans here, but can you guys talk about maybe the differences in fandom or dealing with fans from overseas with the strip and any, stories?
He's huge in Scandinavia, India, Australia, of course, and South America.
Yeah.
We have some fans in Brazil. Yeah, I don't know why he is. He kind of went by the boards here. I don't know if it's simply kind of parochialism on Americans' part. You know, if it's not happening here, it's kind of somewhere else that we can't find on a map. You know.
Well, I can speak to that because a couple of years ago, I actually went. They sent me to Australia for a convention there.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the great experiences of my life, actually.
Mm-hmm. And it's just a Phantom Con, right?
No, that's not right. It was their big Comic Con. It's sort of like the San Diego Con of Australia, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I got there, there's tons of people who are very super enthusiastic about Phantom, and those are the guys that you'll see first. But I still don't know that he doesn't have the presence in their culture that Batman and Superman and the guys who are having movies made of them do. But there's still a big contingent there that's very enthusiastic. And a lot of the things, if people came to my table who were, let's say, 25 or under, what I usually heard was, "Oh, the Phantom. My dad loves the Phantom." So, and that's fine with me. But and I've got another, if I can, a great story that I read about the Phantom's popularity overseas during World War II. The story goes that the Nazis had invaded one of the Scandinavian countries and taken it over, and they were spreading all this propaganda that the United States was on its knees, that it was crumbling, and it was in complete chaos over there. And the Scandinavians knew that this wasn't true because they were still getting the Phantom in their newspapers, and they knew it was produced in the United States. And they said to themselves, as long as the Phantom is still in the paper, we know the United States is all right.
Yeah.
And in fact, the character was so popular there back then that the underground in that country, the anti-Nazi underground, used Phantom as a password.
Yeah.
To recognize one another.
Wow.
It was funny when back in my newspaper days, I had a Phantom poster from Sweden on the wall behind my desk. And a guy walked through there who had been in Norwegian Special Forces, and he just lit up when he saw that poster. Mm-hmm. He said, everybody in the armed services is in Norway is a fan of the Phantom. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, it's he's still big in various places over there.
In fact, and I think it's in New Guinea, I want to say. I hope I have that right. There are like tribes that still build like war shields.
Yeah.
I don't know if they actually go to war with them. I think maybe it's just some sort of traditional tribal thing that they do that have depictions of the Phantom on their war shields.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look it up and actually see some of them.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
One of our fans this week sent me a picture of her forearm where she got the Phantom seal, good seal of protection.
The good sign?
Mm-hmm.
Tattooed on her forearm.
Well, my middle daughter has a Phantom skull tattoo by her ankle.
Oh, really?
She's like, the Phantom sent me to college. So.
That's great. That's terrific.
She and her husband are in Philadelphia tonight, JAMAR. They were in Key West, and they're missed connections on the flight.
Oh no!
Back home to Rhode Island. So,
I'm gonna talk my daughter into getting Phantom tattoo now.
All right, Tony, your audio is a little shaky there. All right, we're going to try to wrap this up. I have a couple more questions. Let's try to blaze through these. All right, Shelly asks, do you guys have any control on the colors that can really enhance or botch the feel of a sequence?
I do my own colors. And Yeah. So the coloring on the Sunday strip is completely my fault or my credit, whichever you decide.
Okay.
Slowly I turn, as they would say.
All right. Now let's go to our buddy Anthony, who's been waiting super patiently. Is there any public information as to how many dailies and how many Sunday papers run the Phantom these days around the world?
No, they won't even tell me. I asked them, and they won't tell me how many papers it's running.
No, they take that with them to their grave. We will never know. The only people that know how many strips their papers are in are the people that actually own the strip, created the strip. So like Lee Falk would know, right? Or like Charles Schultz would know, or the guy who did Mutts, or the guy who does High and Lowest. Or they're the creator, you will know, because it's a partnership between you and the syndicate. But they will not. They basically refuse to tell us how many strips the papers are in. I have asked, but they won't divulge.
Yeah, I asked early on too, and I didn't get a straight answer. I just figured they didn't want to say. I suspect it was because, if we knew how many papers they were in, we'd ask for a raise or something. I don't know. But
all right. So following up with that. So Mark says, does the Phantom run in the newspapers of African countries? I guess you guys would not know, right?
I don't know.
All right, that was an easy one. All right. Also, Mark says, could you please talk about the future of newspaper strips with regard to the recent cancellation of a number of King strips in some papers? That might be out of the scope of what we're talking about tonight, but if you have anything to add to that.
I know that Mike and Tony have definite thoughts on that subject.
Well, I just wrote something about that on my blog in recent weeks. What's happening with newspapers is kind of the reason why the current daily story is running. That's a longer story than what I can explain here, but if you want to put the link up to that story, people can check it out.
And what's the URL of the website? And I'll put that.
Yeah, JAMAR has that, I believe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll put that in our show notes so people can go check that out.
I think we're in the twilight of certainly of adventure strips or continuity strips, and I think we're in the twilight in many respects of the old format of newspaper strips. The fact that those three chains canceled all of those strips will lead, I predict, this year to other papers canceling their strips, because basically, newspapers are not a growth industry. They're like the air is going out of the tires. So just take our papers in Philadelphia, right? The Daily News and the Inquirer merged together, and now the Inquirer is not even in its building anymore, and they sold their presses. So it's like this sort of steady march of decline in newspapers, coupled with the fact that it's an aging base of readership. Which is ironic, because I think at the same time, comics have never been more popular, because you see all the movies, right? So people in general in the culture love comics. And you look at the success of JAMAR's graphic novel as an example. People love comics. All these little kids love comics. But I think that old model of the syndicate, and there being like this hub, I think like webtoons is the future, is the future of that type of a gathering. So I think the syndicates have to sort of figure out, how do they adapt to the new world order, which is always changing. It's changed within the. I've been doing Judge Parker almost 13 years now, and there are certainly no more papers carrying it than when I started. Every year, there's a few less. So, you know, at the same time, whenever they run one of those things in a paper going like, well, which strip should we get rid of? High and Lois or Judge Parker or Zippy? People go, no, don't cancel my favorite strip. I love Zippy. Put Zippy back in the newspaper.
Shout out to Zippy the Pinhead.
Yeah. But I think the fact that they canceled those strips like that and people like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let me add something to that subject, though.
Sure.
You know, I realized when I jumped onto this strip that the adventure strip is a dying art. You know, it's something that just doesn't have the same cultural importance as it did 50, 60 years ago. I know, I mean, I look at the Sunday newspaper and I see, you know, they run them postage stamp size. They stretch them out, they stretch them up, you know, they reshuffle them all, they print them badly. And I took all that into consideration when I started on the strip and said, you know what, I don't care. I'm going to give this thing every bit of gas that I possibly can put into it. I'm going to do the best job that I possibly can. And I can't control whether those guys are going to treat the strip badly. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to give them a reason to give it more real estate. And I'm going to give them a reason not to flex it out and make it look terrible.
Yeah.
I'm going to give this thing everything I've got. And if they screw it up, there's nothing I can do about that. But by God, at least maybe they'll feel guilty about running it so badly.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have one more, and we have one more question, and then a statement, and then everybody gets to go pee. All right, Eternity Forever says, "Will the 23rd Phantom of 2040 become canonized?"
No.
Hell no.
All right. And our good buddy Tim Fielder, who is also a fantastic illustrator. That Phantom is awesome. I might say I love Don Newton's Phantom from Charlton Comics back in the 70s. I know it wasn't Falk's variant, but it just felt epic. Love how the strip is going today. So kudos to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Go down fighting, Jeff. Okay. Damn right.
So, all right, you guys. That's our time for tonight. I hope you guys had fun. I think all of our viewers really enjoyed chopping it up, as the kids say, with you. Mike, you want to put any last words or last questions for our guests?
Well, I was just saying that I would like to thank both of my partners and fellow Phantom Skull Cave dwellers, creators. I just think it's sort of unique, you know, to be able to have the team on like this. I can't imagine Cy Berry and Lee Falk having a podcast together, but you know, it's kind of unique. Again, another unique thing about the strip is that you have 3 creators working on it. I don't think there's another strip that's like that where you have maybe you used to, but I don't think there's a strip now where you have like one Sunday artist and then another daily artist anymore. I think it's all the same team usually.
That's interesting. Was Spider-Man, it had a Sunday artist for a while and a daily artist, I think, a different daily artist.
I think
I'm not positive about that.
Yeah, I think for a little while, yeah. But
yeah.
Well, like I know Joe Sinnott used to ink the Sundays, you know. But,
yeah, maybe it was just an inking change. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I think, you know, hopefully a lot of people will be able to come back and view this. And I feel like Jeff. I feel like I try to put everything into the strip that I can. I know both you guys do. I know we all feel really passionate and happy to work on this strip, which is not always the case. Doing
You
this
leave that alone.
hard. This is a hard job. This is a very, very hard job. And the fans let you know if they feel you're slipping. That's the other thing.
They do that.
I remember right when I first started, I remember some guy wrote me a letter and said I needed to pull my socks up. I was like, okay, I don't know what that means, but I take it that you're not liking what I'm doing. So.
I'm going to use that next time I'm in an altercation on the C bus here in Philly. I need to pull my socks up. All right. Well, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to all.
Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure.
So go ahead.
It's funny that we barely scratched the surface of the Phantom.
Yeah,
but
I know.
Yeah.
Well, that just means you'll have to come back on. We'll have to do a part 2.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
we will, definitely.
All right, thanks. Well, guys, you guys are fantastic guests. Thank you so much. And if you've watched the show, we do a little outro, so hopefully you'll play along with us. Thank you all for watching. Every Wednesday live at 8 p.m. EST, you will find us here. Please check out our deep archives. We've been doing this show for almost 2.5, 3 years now, so there's plenty of episodes you've missed. For our fantastic guests, and Mike and Steve, I'm JAMAR Nicholas. And don't forget, you guys, we're still in a pandemic. All right, Tony and Jeff, we're going to do it. We're still in a pandemic, so don't forget to wash those Kirby hands.
This can help.
Put your hands up, Tony. There you go.
There we go.
Yeah, tell them. All right, you guys, thanks so much. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.